Okay, thanks everybody. I'm Nizar Habash, NYU Abu Dhabi. This is a presentation of some work that was just started last year at Birzeit University in the West Bank in Palestine. And my colleague Mustafa Jarrar, who's the PI on the project, wanted to be here to present this, but unfortunately he could not get a visa in time. So I'm presenting his slides for him. So for a second, pretend I'm actually an adjunct at Birzeit also. So I'm doing secondary role here. This is Birzeit University for people who don't know about it. It's the #1 university in Palestine. And the work is done as part of an institute called the SINA Institute for Knowledge and Arabic Technologies, which Mustafa Jarrar started. They're interested in doing all kind of work on computational linguistics and natural language processing, such as one shown here. Specifically, the paper we're presenting is about a project called Corpus, which is funded by the Research Council of the Palestinian Ministry of Higher Education. And it's interested in developing a corpus of Palestinian Arabic, an annotated corpus of Palestinian Arabic. I've been working with the team since the beginning of the project, and we've had also collaborators like Owen Rambo at Columbia and Rami Iskandar, who's also here. Actually, he's been helping us from the Columbia side. Okay, so for the talk, I'm going to start with a bit of an introduction, talk about distinguishing features of Palestinian Arabic-related work and how the corpus is built. It's still in the preliminary stages, very, very tiny compared to Samah's corpus, but it's on a dialect, which his corpus doesn't have. I'll talk about some of the challenges that you had to deal with and conclude. Okay, so as you all know, I don't need to explain what dialects are. A lot of the tools that are developed for Arabic focus on standard Arabic, as they should have, in fact. And however, when we use these tools to go and work with dialectal Arabic, of any form of dialect, we get a lot of problems, partly because the dialects have different phonology and different morphology from the standard, and there is little descriptions of these dialects that are available for Arabic audiences, I mean, including the fact that there is no standard orthography that everybody can agree on. So that's a major problem for any work on Arabic dialects. At the same time, in the last few years, we've seen an exponential growth in the use of dialectal material, dialectal text, as Hamdi told us earlier, with all these tweets, that's amazing numbers. And this data needs to be dealt with, and so that's why this work is relevant. We have to look some more on dialectal data. The goal of Corpus, it's a small project with a very specific focus, is to build a corpus for Palestinian Arabic. We're currently starting with about 43,000 words that we want to fully annotate. We're using Metamira to be part of the annotation process, and then we're doing manual annotation. This is kind of the sum of the idea. And the idea here is also this would be the first step toward developing NLP applications for Palestinian Arabic. Of course, the insights and possibly extensions that can be built on top of this are relevant to many other dialects, not just this one. So distinguishing features of Palestinian Arabic is considered a southern Levantine dialect. And I just want to kind of, before everybody says these are not distinguishing features you're talking about, yes, the point here is to present features that distinguish Palestinian from standard Arabic. In fact, a lot of these features are shared by other dialects, definitely within Levantine. Palestinian, oddly, is interesting in that it seems to be somewhere, in some ways, similar to Egyptian, and in some ways similar to Lebanese and Syrian. So it's kind of in between. And you'll see this from some of the summary of facts that I have here. So in terms of the phonology, things like the pronunciation of the classical Arabic qaf that actually ends up being produced in 4 different varieties within Palestine, depending on urban or rural or certain Druze community. Diphthongs that have actually became more A-O sounds, and then short vowels just appear and disappear in different places that look random from an MSA point of view, but of course they have a regularity that underlies them. In terms of morphology, you get a lot of collapse in the verbal paradigm, so the sizes of a paradigm for the verb, the number of forms that you have is a lot smaller compared to standard Arabic. This is very similar to most other dialects, actually. And there are also additional clitics, like the progressive b, the demonstrative particle h that attaches to various nouns, and then the negation with the mesh circumclitic that is also a main part of Egyptian Arabic also. In terms of the lexicon, we find lots of items that are portmanteaus, so these are multi-words that are joined together, like the word biddi, which is bi widdi, or leish, which is li ayi shay, that have basically merged into a single form, and lots of borrowed words. Some go back to Turkish, and some as modern as Hebrew usage that made it into Palestinian Arabic. Now, in terms of related work for doing corpora collection, specifically for the dialect here, there have been, increasing amount of work since the beginning of 2000, and so a lot of effort has been done on Egyptian Arabic at the LDC. There's also some work that was done on Levantine that was quite early at the LDC in 2006, and several other smaller projects. In terms of work on dialectal orthography, we actually referred to the work by Habash et al. On developing a conventional orthography for dialectal Arabic to solve this problem, and I'll talk some more about it today too. And of course, there are also work on developing morphological analysis and disambiguation for the dialect, the most successful of which is work that's done on Egyptian Arabic under the Kalima and the Medamira systems from Colombia. Okay, so building the corpus. Some of the challenges that we had was the fact that there are very little resources that are available. I mean, this is unlike the case of the Gulf data with all the tweets that are going on. It was much less going on in Palestine in that sense. And the data collection was a lot more painstaking to actually go, had some students look around, scour different websites to collect this data and make sure to verify that it's actually in the correct dialect of use that we're interested in. Also, of course, the question of the orthographic consistency is a major problem. We made a decision not to look at any dialectal data that's done in Arabizi, or this is a romanization of Arabic. This is just a choice to start with. Eventually, we'll have to look at Arabizi, of course. And the focus was to look at precision and variety rather than just size. So instead of just collecting lots and lots of data, we wanted something that eventually we could actually say, this is a data set that we can evaluate against. We annotated it carefully. We know exactly what's going on in it. So that was the goal of this first effort on this project. So the data was collected, just a set that shows you some of the examples of the kind of information that's in it. It has entries from Facebook and Twitter, blogs, forums, Palestinian folk stories, but the majority, about half, comes from a TV show, a popular Palestinian local TV show called Watan Awatar. It's a kind of a local comedy, make fun of politics, etc. And we got all the transcripts for that show, and we will be annotating them. Okay, now what we're defining as annotation, we constrained, instead of talking about something at the level of the complexity of what the LDC did for standard Arabic or for Egyptian Arabic, actually, we reduced it to just providing a coda, conventional orthography form of the word, in addition to specifying the lemma and the backwalter tag. But the backwalter tag, when we designed it, we decided to actually use it without the vowels in the morphemes. So it's actually n-diacritized annotation, except for the lemma. The lemma we are diacritizing because we want to be able to link it through dictionaries. But the rest of the analysis we're not worrying about the diacritization for. And we also provide English glosses to help us link to other resources for standard Arabic and for other dialects that we have. In terms of the annotation, we use the idea that has been successful in the past of using an automatic annotation process first and then having manual annotation. And for that, we wanted to use a tool developed at Columbia called Medamira, which is the descendant of the Meda tool and the Amira tool that Muna Diyam had developed, and then have an additional manual step on it to verify the correctness of the annotation. Okay, so the kind of challenges I'll be talking about, specifically two things. One of them is the issue of the conventional orthography. Because remember, we wanted to work on a corpus, we want to annotate it, we have no standard orthography for this corpus, and we don't have a morphological analyzer for it. So these are the kind of two main things that we want to be able to deal with first of all, basically. So the conventional orthography, I mentioned different facts earlier saying that this particular consonant in Standard Arabic is pronounced different ways. And of course, what happens when people write, this maps into the writing. So as you find in many other dialects, people sometimes write a word either phonologically, the way they pronounce it, or they write it etymologically. They relate it, they propose, oh, this is really, I know though I'm saying kalbi, I'm actually talking about qalbi, And certain Palestinian dialects do say that, of course. So, but as I said, so you get elb, qalb, kelb, and gelb, and then you get many different, forms of writing it. Things with vowel shortening. So Standard Arabic allows many long vowels in a word, and Palestinian doesn't. So you end up people writing qanun or anun, and it's the same word effectively. Same with the clitics, where a clitic like the future particle ha, it's not really clear. Do you write it attached to the word, or you don't write it attached to the word, or you do both, And then there's some cases that are actually interesting that we found from looking at the corpus. The case of the alif lam, the definite article, where in Palestinian it ends up being pronounced as li in some cases. So if you have a word like blad, it becomes liblad, right? Which is confusing from the Egyptian point of view because it actually means something else. It's for the countries, which in Palestinian is leblad. If you're confused, you should be. It was confusing to me too. So what we did, we looked at work that we did before on Egyptian Arabic. This is a conventional orthography or dialectal Arabic, which was developed with Mona Diyam and Owen Rambo at Columbia. Coda is intended to be a way of writing all different dialects. So we have a set of principles that are shared across all of the different dialects, and we try to have, actually, we're quite, in a lot of our rules, we're actually strictly consistent with Standard Arabic principle of the writing. But for some cases, we have to make decisions, and sometimes they're ad hoc, and we just have to enforce them and teach them to our students who are doing the annotation. So I'm going to skip through some things here because of time, but I'll give you an example. Cases, for example, like the MSA cognates, we actually would write the word the way it would be etymologically written. So qalb is written as qalb, but then you pronounce it in different ways. You can think of this as a form of historical spelling, if you may, kind of like what English successfully did, but we try to control the degree of it to some extent. Things on dialectal clitics, we just make a decision. You're going to write it this way here. You're not going to do that for this whole class, and you just go with it. And then doing this allows us to then do mapping and normalizations and evaluate how correctly do we actually normalize. For certain words like bardo, that could be written in a dozen different ways. We just pick one way of doing it, and that's the way we go with it. Okay. So when we did the work on Palestinian, a lot of the rules that we used for Egyptian were, of course, kept exactly the same. There was no change as part of the principle of it. Some of the few things that were added were, first, the words in Standard Arabic that have a kaf in them, that in some dialect, in Fallahi Palestinian, become ch. So you say chelb for a dog instead of kelb. So those are actually included within the rules to actually write it with a K in that case. Some additional clitics that did not exist in Egyptian, like bha, that's in bhal bayt or ahal bayt, that doesn't exist, and things like tayshuf, which is hatta yishuf, for example. So those would be also added. And then, of course, there's the list of the exceptional classes. Now, we did a quick analysis of this on about 1,000 words from the Quras corpus. After we set the guidelines, we annotated them, and we found that about 16% of the time, the form of the word changed, which sounds actually quite good. If you stay around for the shared task on Standard Arabic, it's actually better than the Standard Arabic performance in some way, the baseline. And we also found that about 8% of the words were very specific Palestinian items that we could not have used the Egyptian guidelines to help us. So this is actually good. It says that there's not a huge amount of things that will actually be changed. And this is also part of the Coda principle, is that we're not creating a completely new orthography. We're just picking some conventions and trying to stick to them to help our computational efforts. In terms of the morphological annotation, as I said earlier, we will be using morphological analyzers that already exist. Now, the question is, when you work on Palestinian Arabic, what should make sense? To use the Standard Arabic morphological analyzer, disambiguator, or to use the Egyptian? And I bet you know what the answer is. So we did an analysis and manually checked it for about 460 words. And you see the numbers here. What it shows is statistics for cases when we get no analysis or a wrong analysis versus correct analysis. And if you use the standard Arabic on the Palestinian data, in about 18% of the time, using the standard system, we get no analysis. But if you use the Egyptian version of the system, Madamira, that number goes down to 7. So we're solving a lot of problems just by basically using the Egyptian version. The short vowels are not consistent. The pronunciations are obviously different between Egyptian and Palestinian, but there's a lot of phenomena that actually are the same. Here's some examples. This is all in the paper in detail. I'll probably pick up just a couple of things. For example, in the first word, abuku, which means your father, this form is acceptable in Egyptian. So we get that form analyzed correctly, and we use it in Palestinian the same way. But in standard Arabic, it's not a word that exists. It's not analyzable in that form. It's not abukum, right? Similarly, we get things like libnuk, number 3, which actually is el-bunuk in the particular context. So in this case, neither the Egyptian nor the standard Arabic could figure that out. This is particularly problematic for the Palestinian case. And then, words like aywa is the same, I guess, like abuku. I'm trying to think here. Yes, number 9, bin ruddillak. Is something that with Egyptian returned was usable for us. It was close enough. You don't have this construction of the lek being attached to the word. And then things like hadol is not in Egyptian or standard Arabic, so it failed in both cases. And that falls within the percentage of things that we had to do manually. Okay, so in conclusion, I presented here preliminary results on the potential and limitations of using existing resources, particularly the Madamira Egyptian resource, to help us in annotating this corpus. We presented the collection of this corpus. It's a small corpus. We're also independently developing a tool to help us with doing the annotation that is aware of the closeness and similarities between dialect, standard Arabic, and the dialect of interest, in our case, Palestinian Arabic. And some of the issues that we had to consider was how to develop a Palestinian-specific, maybe perhaps in this conclusion, think dialect-specific for a new dialect. It doesn't really necessarily apply. I think the lessons are could apply to any other new dialect that is of limited resources that we're interested in. Obviously, by annotating the lemma, we're helping develop a lexicon that go with it. Eventually, we want to take these annotations and use it to adapt Madamira Egyptian so that it can work better for the dialect. So do kind of a feedback loop in it. The goals for the future is to extend the corpus, annotate it more, and then eventually use the annotations that are generated to help improve a morphological analyzer that we have for Egyptian and MSA to include Palestinian Arabic. And I'm interested, of course, working on other dialects too, and hopefully that will be in the future. Thank you.
Just had a quick question. So basically, we think you would be doing dialect identification first and then figure out which analyzer to send to, or do you want to build a big analyzer to do everything? And what do you think?
Yeah, that is a good question. So the Madamira Egyptian system that we use does both standard Arabic and Egyptian. So it kind of, with an internal hard-coded bias toward Egyptian. So if it's equally likely, it would just go and prefer the Egyptian reading often, because it expects you to have already done the dialect ID in that case. I know there is work that was done this year by Spence Green, where he actually did an idea of combining different resources from standard and the dialect and just have one mega system that does everything, but then he only did it for segmentation. He didn't do it for everything. I think, for me, the dream would be to actually do both together eventually. I think that's what I would like to get to the point of doing, to just be able to have one mega system that is able to do both dialect identification and morphological disambiguation, and maybe be aware of lexical preferences like some of the cases that Hamdi showed us earlier, all together. I think that would be the great goal that we were going to. We're not there yet, I fear. Yes, ma'am.
I have two comments.
Sure.
The first one is, from the data you showed in modern standard Arabic, we can say هذا البيت or البيت هذا. The Egyptian preference is that, while the level time is هالبيت. Do you
Yeah, so you're asking a question about dialect identification more than it is about the morphology analysis and codification. I'll answer it. So the answer is that in principle, yes, you can actually include information like this. This would be what we call in our field, rule-based approaches. You specify a rule, but typically these approaches expect you to already have a good analysis that knows, oh, that this word here is supposed to be the demonstrative particle or whatever. The trouble is that we fail at this point at this level. So if you have, a word that's misspelled from the point of view of the standard Arabic or the rules that you wrote, you're not going to be able to apply the rules. What typically people do, the most successful current method, like the one used by Omar Zidane for dialect ID, or the work that's done by Hiba al-Fardi, who should be here, and Muna Diyam, they actually use statistical methods that effectively could learn these rules, but they do not actually explicitly write them in. They just look at statistics of how often do I see these words in a particular, all words. I mean, you get engrams, basically. You just count how often do I see this pair of words in a large collection. So we kind of get to them, but not directly. And it may be once the systems are sophisticated enough, there may be a place to have such ideas to help us reinforce and test the hypothesis of how well does this idea work. But right now we cannot do it.
What about the lab? Competition, but I have so many questions.
Sure. Yeah, we'll talk during the break, no problem.